All right, well, welcome back to Exhaust Sports Auto. My name is Kevin, and you are here to witness the 2020 Lexus NX 300h Hybrid. So let's just get right into this little bad boy right here. Few of you, like 2 or 3 people, have requested to see the NX. So, well, here it is, brand new. Well, it has about 9,194 miles on it, so there is that. And honestly, aside from my tripod, kind of rattling in the back there, the vehicle itself is actually pretty much rattle proof. Really, this is a really solid cabin space. I'm really impressed with that. So that was one of the first things I really liked about this vehicle here. But I guess with all good things, let's just start off with the look here. This vehicle is pretty much based off of the RAV4 platform, and this car obviously has a far more radical design to it, right? Big spindle grille on it. I mean, yeah, it really does make quite a little statement for a little SUV. So some of you might love it, some of you might hate it. I mean, this is pretty extreme for a small little SUV like this, but I personally, I think that's what gives it like the little character that it has, right? But obviously you can decide for yourself if you like the looks of this thing or not. I mean, that's completely up to you. Let's just get into some of these driving dynamics here. This being the little hybrid here. Okay. CVT, a little 194 horsepower. It is mated to a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder Atkinson engine here with a nickel hydride battery system. Produces about 195 total horsepower and a ambiguous amount of torque. Lexus never really states how much torque these electric hybrid vehicles have, but I'm assuming it's probably close to 300 foot-pounds of torque. I'm assuming it does feel a little torquey. Does have like that whiny 4-cylinder noise, and on braking you get like those kind of strange extraterrestrial sounds upon braking, those little electric sounds. I will have to say, one thing that you can't deny is the handling of this thing. Usually it's the comfort, the refinement, that's the sort of thing that I usually praise on these Lexus vehicles, but in this, one of the first things I really appreciated was just how solid this thing handles. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of roll, a bit of body lean, all that stuff, but there is a lot of confidence going on with this NX here. One of the things I really like the way the RAV4 handled. I drove the 2019 RAV4, and I really, truly did like the way it handled out on city streets. But one of the things I noticed was there's a little bit of high-speed instability. I noticed, like, on the highway, kind of tended to hop around a little bit. This thing, not at all. This thing is really planted. This thing weighs about 4,100 pounds, about 4,180, I think is what this thing weighs here. It does come standard with all-wheel drive. When you get the hybrid, you just automatically get the all-wheel drive system. So it's definitely got some weight going on for it, and that kind of helps it feel a little bit more planted into the road. So it's kind of a sensation that I kind of don't really mind, honestly. But more importantly, this thing is fitted with a double wishbone in the rear. It does have a strut-based suspension up front, but that double wishbone in the rear, dude, I wasn't really quite sure about all the specifications of this vehicle when I first got into it and drove it, but handling was one of the first things I noticed. And when I found out this thing had a double wishbone in the rear, I was just like, yeah, that does make sense. It is quite planted and sure-footed in the way that this thing handles. So talking about this old drivetrain a little bit, it is that 4-cylinder hybrid thing, so it doesn't sound very inspiring. It actually sounds like a vacuum cleaner. And also this CVT, it is not trying to mimic like a 10-speed or like a 20-speed transmission. It genuinely is just a CVT. It has like that rubber bandy effect, but however, it's, as far as CVTs go, like traditional CVTs, this is a pretty good one. I actually don't mind it all too much. There's a bit of lag. I am driving in the normal mode right now. I did, however, find the sport mode in this particular vehicle. It is actually pretty good. You don't just cruise around and hover around like 2,000 or 2,500 RPM when you put it in the sport mode. It's just a little bit more eager to downshift, I guess, or put you in a higher RPM band. And yeah, when you do shift it into the sport mode, the little gauge cluster here does change. You do get a more traditional tachometer here. Kind of maxes out around 5,500 RPM, if you will. And I think for casual drivers, I think like for the person that this is intended for, I think like the power output for this thing is actually pretty appropriate. It never really feels like it's struggling. However, I will say I would never really get this hybrid trim. I would definitely stem for the turbocharged 4-cylinder with about 235 horsepower and I think 258 pounds-feet of torque. That's one I would go for. I will say that one of the things that this hybrid has going for it is, yes, the MPG is going to be better. I am averaging about 27 in the city, and that's pretty aggressive city driving, if you will. But it is rated for about 33 city and 30 on the highway. But most importantly, though, this thing, it doesn't weigh much more than its non-hybrid counterpart. If you see here, and, just chuck this thing in, and it does handle itself extremely well. You hear that, it never really shifts up for you, but you keep putting your foot down into it. It's never super uninspiring. The brakes on this thing, though, with the regenerative braking thing that this thing is fitted with, my gosh, this thing has pretty touchy brakes. You do have a lot of confidence in its braking power. So I feel like driving and handling all that stuff, I feel like you have a lot of confidence in this thing. It never feels like, you had to kind of be out of the highway for you to kind of feel like the power deficiency of this thing when you're really trying to, get up and go at speed. That's kind of where the lack of horsepower kind of becomes an issue. But otherwise, for city driving, this is pretty good. But yeah, like I was saying, there's not a huge weight difference here when you go for this hybrid model, and it is actually fitted with the all-wheel drive as standard. So I feel like this weight is pretty justified. The standard vehicle with front-wheel drive weighs at about 3,900 pounds, so there is that. But I just feel like the refinement would be greater. I think like the price difference, if you were to get an all-wheel drive, non-F Sport, non-hybrid, it would be like $1,000 less in terms of MSRP. This is about a $39,000 starting MSRP, and I just don't think it's worth it for the MPG gains that you are getting. I just think the lack of refinement with the CVT and all that stuff is not really worth it. I think that 6-speed automatic and that turbocharged 4 is a much better setup. Now, speaking of refinement and comfort, one of the things that I have noticed with this car is it is surprisingly noisy. And I've kind of experienced this with a couple of Lexus cars, pretty much all the Lexus cars I've driven, aside from an LS460, the 2013 model. Even the LS500H I had, it had a decent amount of road noise and tire noise. However, that was more so at the highway speeds. But this vehicle, it kind of always has a above average tire noise going on. This thing is fitted with some garbage Yokohama Geolanders or whatever, so that might have something to do with it. This thing is running on 18-inch wheels. There is 17s on offer, so that might help with it. But most importantly though, is this thing comfortable? Kind of, but I have noticed that when you go over some bumps here, it has a tendency to kind of rock you around, even in like the front two seats here. Usually you might find some unrefinement in the rear end. Some vehicles have like a torsion beam. You might feel like the rear end kind of tends to bounce around a little bit. So it's kind of not as good for the rear occupants. But this thing, obviously has more of a legitimate setup in the rear. And in the front here, I kind of feel like you move around a little bit, from side to side, even like forward and back. There's just more movement going around, and I just think that's a very unrefined characteristic, especially for a Lexus. I do think it's kind of because this thing rides kind of high, which I think is a good thing for people looking for that. I think a lot of people in this segment, they want that higher driving position, and you do for the most part get that, but it's still easy to drive. It's not a super wide vehicle, it's not a super long vehicle, so it's still very easy to place out on the road. However, I think that tall nature of this thing, it is kind of giving you that wandery feel, like that movement, that constant movement over the bumps. It does do a pretty good job of soaking up these small little bumps on the road, but once you go over something larger, it does tend to move you around. However, it doesn't have like a floaty nature. It is kind of a more pinned down feeling. I complained about this in the LS500H, that I had like this floaty tendency. This one does feel pinned down and sharp, and that's kind of why it handles so good. Keep in mind, this is not some F Sport model or anything like that. However, that is on option, and I do quite like the F Sport Lexus vehicles. It is quite good. You don't get a whole lot of torque steer with this thing. It does actually handle itself really well. Now, the F Sport is what I would actually rather put my money into. Like, I would never like pay up for the hybrid trim models of Lexus. If there's an F Sport model, I would rather go for that instead, because it's going to be even further pinned down. This thing already has 18s and it's not riding terribly, and you do get 18s with the F Sport, so I might go for that. A lot of people are saying that the adaptive dampers on that thing, which does come from an LC500, you know, it's quite a large, it's quite the vehicle to quote there for Lexus, but it is the same adaptive damper setup that you do get in the LC500, and people are saying that that one does ride better in comfort mode than the other NX trim models. I don't know how much I believe that. You know, adaptive dampers typically don't make a huge difference to me, but something you want to check out. I just like the looks of the F Sport, and also the transmission logic on F Sport vehicles to me feel a little bit better. And again, the handling and the dynamics are even sharper. Might want to check out the ride quality on those vehicles though, because I do think that the handling on these non-F Sport NX models are good enough. So a standard NX turbo with either front wheel drive or all wheel drive with 17-inch wheels might be the ideal choice. I don't know. That's something you might want to check out. Driving experience, you know, as a Lexus as a whole, you know, this is a solid vehicle, of course. I mean, I think the biggest, you know, plus points for me with this particular Lexus is the handling. I do like the looks. I do like how the steering feel in all the Lexus cars are always very natural. It's always weighted correctly, so I do appreciate that. I do like the slightly, you know, higher up feel that you have here with the NX in terms of the driving ability. You know, it's got nice big fat side view mirrors here, so it's a very easy vehicle to drive and navigate through traffic. You know, I'm never really stressed out about that, so those are some great pluses there. Some of the negatives for me are the engine setup, you know, this drivetrain. I'm not a huge fan of the hybrid setup. And despite the excellent braking power that you get, I think the hybrid really does limit the refinement of this car. I don't like the amount of road noise and tire noise and wind noise that you get with this vehicle. It's a bit unnatural for me for a Lexus car, and I'm not a huge fan of the kind of movement that you get when you go over larger bumps, so there is that. But with all that established, let's talk about this interior now. All right, so talking about this interior a little bit here. So like I was kind of saying, like one of the first things I noticed about this vehicle is just how solid this cabin is. So there is, you know, with 9,000 miles on it, I mean, there's no creaks and rattles with this thing whatsoever. I mean, if you heard anything, it was my tripod in the back there. But, you know, as I was just, you know, driving this vehicle, so solid. When you touch up against things, I mean, it is really well put together. I mean, that is one of the key attributes of Lexus. It's just their fit and finish, and that continues even in these kind of not as expensive models, right, like this NX. So that's one of the things that you can definitely appreciate when you buy a Lexus. I will, however, say that the design language in this thing a little bit more triangular, kind of a little bit accurate-ish, to be honest with you. I don't know what that's all about. One of the few things I kind of noticed with this cabin here is a little bit different from some of the other Lexus vehicles I've tried out. But, you know, ergonomically, it's excellent, just like how most Toyota Lexus products are. Everything is easy to touch. There's plenty of hard touch buttons here, something that the LS500H even lacked, right? You have your heated and cooled seat controls right here. All the climate control completely separated from the screen. Love that. And you have this little display to show you the temperature. So all this stuff is completely separated from the screen. And now I don't really mind the Lexus infotainment as much. You do kind of have like this little touchpad thing here. And for 2020, well, for 2019, they added Apple CarPlay, and for 2020, they added the Android Auto. So now you have both in the 2020 model. So something to note if you appreciate that. A Mark Levinson sound system is available with these vehicles. This particular car doesn't have it. However, I will say that the audio system that's fitted with this particular car is excellent. I love it. You know, once you kind of tweak the bass and the treble and all that stuff, it does sound extremely good. So something that you can definitely enjoy even in the kind of non-fully loaded NX model. So that's a great thing right there. It does have a traditional gear shifter. Definitely appreciate that. And once you put in park or drive or whatever, it'll automatically kind of disengage and engage the parking brake, the electric parking brake. So I do appreciate that as well. There's like an automatic mode for that here. So definitely leave that on. Very convenient. Now kind of going back to that infotainment here. A lot of people like to complain about it, but here I'm really not, because all the climate is separated. You know, all the heated seat and cooled seat controls, it's all separated from the other screen here. So unlike the LS500H, you don't have to go digging for that stuff. It's all right here for you. So The rest of the controls, you just kind of connect your phone and there you go. I mean, you listen to your music or whatever. I will say connecting to Bluetooth was a little bit more cumbersome in this particular Lexus than in other models, so not quite as easy. I don't know what's up with that. Otherwise, it's traditional Lexus. You know, you kind of operate it with the touchpad here and kind of go about your business. You have a couple of options that you can kind of, you know, change around, tweak here to your liking, but overall, it's not too bad. Again, you do kind of have to be parked to use this, and if you are parked, it's not bad. I mean, you shouldn't be screwing with it while you're driving anyway, so that's a great thing. Gauges, very traditional. It does change when you change the drive mode selection here, which you have a little knob here, and does work extremely well. Has a quality finish to it. Same goes for the volume knob and the tuning knob. They all have a great finish to them as well. But yeah, the gauges, they do change, and otherwise it's pretty traditional. You have a very simple to read speedometer here, that's on digital, and you have your kind of coolant gauges and your fuel gauges as well with the helper screen in the middle. Kind of hasn't changed ever since 2014 or whatever. You have these useless paddles. I didn't even talk about this in the other drive, but it's so stupid. I mean, yeah, they look great. I wish they would operate as well, because once I had the vehicle in sport mode, I was kind of playing with the paddles here. It just didn't even do anything. It wouldn't even like properly go into the gears I selected. It was very strange. I don't like that. But again, you just leave it in automatic and you just go about your business. You just have automatic headlights, which I do like. You have one touch up and down windows for all 4 windows, which I do like. There is no double pane glass. However, the glass that is fitted with it is kind of on the thicker side, but still not enough to kind of isolate this vehicle to my liking. It's just something I noticed. You do have the auto kind of fold-in mirrors here. When you kind of lock and unlock the vehicle, you just need to have it in the auto position, and it's good to go. Steering wheel, it's a great size. I really do like it. It's a nice little thing to grip onto here. It's kind of got like this leather going on here. And speaking of leather, these seats, stupid comfortable. Always appreciate that with Lexus vehicles. It's not like the F Sport seat or anything like that. However, it does a great job of just making this a non-fatiguing experience. You can just spend all kinds of miles in here. It's not like a real leather, so it's supposed to hold up pretty good. Most Lexus vehicles with like this fake leather has held up extremely well. I did notice in the rear there, the armrest part is kind of come off a little bit there. It's something I kind of noticed, but it's not really going to wrinkle really as much as the real leather seats will. So something I noticed. As a whole, I think this will hold up pretty well. Everything for the most part is very padded. It's a very plush interior space. Most of the Lexus cars are. Even the the dash and all that stuff is kind of wrapped in this fake kind of leather with this fake stitching, I guess. Like this fake carbon fiber plastic thing going on here. It's not too bad, I guess. You have this strange little thing here. You kind of take this out and you have like this little mirror thing. So kind of makes me wonder what the demographic is for this vehicle. I mean, you have a bit of storage in there, I guess, but it's kind of strange. Nice little place to rest your palm when you operate the touchpad. You have a decent amount of space here in the glove compartment, not the glove compartment, the armrest here. It's a good amount of space. I do like that. And the glove box is a decent size as well. Rear seats, right? I can definitely fit back there. Definitely not an issue. It's not a plethora of space, but I do fit. I'm about 5'11", and front seats, that's not an issue either. It does have a sunroof here. Not a panoramic, but you do have a regular sunroof. But head space in here, not an issue for anybody. They kind of built this to be like a taller vehicle, so there is that. But yeah, you can kind of like recline those seats as well on the rear. I think this whole vehicle is about like 182 or 183 inches long, so it's not a totally like a very long vehicle by any means. But you can actually fold those seats all the way down as well to get like the maximum amount of space. The trunk space is decent. It's not massive, but it's decent. You can definitely make it work, and you do have a kind of a spare tire back there as well, so I do like that. The lift gate, it is kind of slow to open. I did notice that, but I can actually kind of stand underneath the lift gate, and I'm not like rubbing my head up against it, so that's good. I do like that. But as a whole, yeah, it's pretty practical. It is roomy enough for adults, and it's going to get pretty decent fuel economy. I've been kind of pushing it, and I've still been getting like 27 in the city with aggressive city driving, right? But again, I do still recommend getting the non-hybrid, so you get the turbo engine. It's going to be faster. I think it's going to like kind of alleviate all these strange nuanced things that you're going to experience with a hybrid vehicle. That's just my preference anyway. But check it out, see if the Refinement is going to be all right for you. If you're an owner of this vehicle, definitely let me know in the comment section below how it's holding up for you. If you still enjoy it after a couple of years of ownership, let me know all these things. And with that pretty much concludes my review on the NX300H. Thank you for watching. Take care and goodbye.